Yeah, I did. I think I did expect it like that, but we've never seen it on our farm with turf on it. So when we did see something like that on our farm, it was yeah, that's definitely our place. When we did, is that? No, that's the road.
I think that's Adam's place, isn't it?
Yeah. When we did see it on our farm many years ago, it was veggies. So you know, that kind of look isn't so bad if you're growing veggies because you can go straight in and start working again. When you see that on a turf farm, it's you got to go into recovery mode somehow.
We've always, growing up for us, we've always heard the stories that, you know, I hadn't seen a flood until those times, so you always heard about it, you always knew it happened, and same as sort of Paul, it was always in the veggie days, so you know, it was what it is, but yeah, just the first time seeing it was a eye-opener, just a sickening feeling that where do you start from? But yeah, it's just would have happened, but in the veggies, it's dirt around just so.
It's not an issue. You plant it back in anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't affect
no, that's right. The product.
Well, you lost the product 100%,
yeah.
but you can get something going straight away. As soon as it dries out, you could work up a little bit of ground and plant something straight away.
Much quicker to bounce back. Yeah, crop turnover. The crop cycle's a lot quicker. Yeah. So yeah, as Paul was saying, like it's a bit unique. So I saw it all. Silt from silt layers to just sand dunes pretty much. So we had a neighbouring paddock that was all cultivated before the first big flood, and that paddock was then thrown onto one of our fields at depths of like between 3/4 of a metre to 1.5 metres deep in places. So yeah, we ended up turning into pretty much soil removers, excavation for a while there. It's quite resilient, but it did, if it's any thicker than sort of 15 mil, that's where the damage seemed to have occurred, where it's pretty much just, kill off and then replant, which we found worked the best.
When there's a bit more sand over the profile, it seems to affect it a lot more. As you get the sand, once you get sand in there, the strength of the grass underneath when you roll it up,
you struggle.
You lose your tensile strength.
If you've got much sand, you won't. It's tough to cut.
Yeah, with your silt, as much as it makes the product more wet and heavy when you're harvesting it, but a bit of silt, sort of, you get a half decent product. But once you get the sand on it, that's for our instance where the sand was, it just start again with it. You're not gonna save it, sort of thing. That's from what we found.
Where did the sand come down mostly?
Riverbanks, paddocks around you.
When it's super thick, it'll kill the grass, if it's really thick. But if it's just in the thatch layer, it's either persist with really heavy turf. You go back to short and rolls and bits and pieces to get them on a pallet. And like there were stages there, we cutting 50 metres and it's 1.6, 1.7 tonne,
I suppose it depends on the time of year too, and definitely the variety, because if there's times of year where if it was to happen now, you'd stay wet for a fair bit, and if you had a lot of silt, when it dried up, you could probably use some machines that'd mill it off, like what we demonstrated, and you'd come into the growing season, and then if you're in the growing season and you milled off the cooch, your top mate cooch, and got rid of it and still got plant stock on the ground and a hard base to go forward, if that's the decision that you could make, then that's good. That's not too bad. That's not a bad result. With buffalo, it's probably a lot harder. If you go and top make buffalo, I don't think it'd be economically viable for them to do it. I don't grow it, so when I have grown it, I haven't had it in a flood, so I don't think it'd be viable to do it that way.
But be just as quick as to chop it up.
Plowed in.
You lose your tensile strength once when you top make the silt and your grass away, you lose your tensile strength next crop. That's what we found with it.
We pretty much pick where we can harvest, where it's still saleable, and wherever it's not saleable, hoe it in.
So make your decisions on time of year and crop variety, and yeah.
I suppose it's been too wet to know how compact everything has become. Because when things are wet, you don't really, the compaction doesn't worry you. I suppose we'll find out that when we go into dry times again.
Just a smaller observation was from all the excessive rain, we're just noticing we're able to actually access paddocks quicker than usual. Like in other words, like for how wet it's generally been, most of these last 3-4 years, you can generally get in quite quickly with the harvesting equipment and harvest turf. So it's quite surprising.
Or we're
in
more
some way.
tolerant.
Yeah,
Of
or
making a
maybe we're
mess.
more tolerant too. Yeah, who knows? Could be a combination of things, or things are a bit more automated, so that's helping. Yeah. So, but no, definitely found that. Yeah.
I suppose in the aspect of with compaction, if they weren't getting the silt on the farm and they weren't having to restart and plough paddocks and start again, there probably would be the massive compaction issue going on with tons and tons of water, weight of water over it. But if a lot of people here have actually turned their paddocks over in the last few years, the compaction level hasn't hit us yet. The compaction issue hasn't hit us yet. So
I think for our business, since the first flood, I don't think there's one paddock that hasn't been turned over and started again since we started getting floods there in 2020. So each paddock, we had the opportunity to re-level, reshape. So obviously you're turning over ground, you're moving ground, doing what you need to do. But even the areas that we didn't re-level, I'm pretty sure we've redone them or done a fair bit of aeration in them, just to do what we have to do.
I wouldn't say not so much a silt like that on the video there, but more so if you get the big sand dumps and depending where you're situated on the river, it changes greatly. We don't get, where we are situated on Pittown Bottoms Road, we don't get big dumps of sand or anything coming up over the bank on our paddocks. We get silt. But other guys, a couple of k's down the road, they can get, like Jonathan said, not just from that paddock being cultivated, but in certain areas where if you're on a bend in the river and stuff like that, it can put 2 foot of sand over your paddocks. So that changes the game completely.
The first 2 floods were completely different for us. For the first time, we didn't get as much sand, but then the second flood that we had in that same year, we had more riverbanks break and wash out with that, and the water coming in a different direction. We had sand pushed over the driveway different. We had the driveways cut out differently and put into the paddock in different areas. So depending on the velocity of the water coming down, how quick it wants to come down, and the other elements that go on, it changes flood to flood. It's hard to say, that paddock's going to get this amount of, it's prone to get more sand there. It can just change. Every flood's different, so it's a hard one to say.
This cycle of floods in some areas, such as Cornwallis and that, it's changed the landscape. So the floods are doing everything different than they used to do historically.
It's a different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a different ballgame now.
and that's because of the speed of the water.
Yeah.
The absolute speed of the water. The water that's coming down. I wasn't here on the weekend on Friday when the water came down, but 1.6 metres in 1 hour rise.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Really?
That's massive.
Because there's
That's
no
scary.
local rain, no backwater holding it back. It was all coming from Camden Way.
That's scary.
So
bastard.
no local rain, you're pretty much almost kicking dust, and that happened in a previous flood as well. And that's where the damage does occur. If we have no localised rain and it's coming from further upstream, that's where all the damage will occur as water breaks in onto dry land. The velocity's not slowed down, so it'll just come crashing through. It can even damage infrastructure, a lot of riverbank damage, knock out sheds, just do all sorts of things, affect drains, wash out roads as we saw earlier in the video.
And that affects the silt level. Depends where it cuts, is where it gets silt from to throw it in different areas.
Well, to take Cornwallis for example, what Joe mentioned before, Cornwallis there from the first flood, there was a major washout there with the council equipment there with the drains, and that hasn't been repaired, and that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, taking more. But we've got a farm there in Cornwallis, and the water, when it comes down these floods, fills the back, it comes in from there and sort of fills all the lower areas of Cornwallis first. So you lose a lot of water. It's a big area where water can go. And our farm actually, you can see after the flood just went down on Friday, You see the water, where the water come in through the farms and in through the creek. You can see the properties that are closer to that creek level with more brown silt, and as it got to sort of where our property is a little bit higher, you see there's not as much silt has come, and that's because it sort of filled the back of the properties first and coming in a different direction, then right from the river jumping over the banks. So you lose so much water, and that plays a part with Freeman's Reach and sort of Pitt Town, because a lot of water, that's closer to the dam, so a lot of water gets lost in that section where it fills up there, and it affects what happens downstream as well. So it's
At the moment, it's a safe bet that Cornwallis is going to fill up first. The Cornwallis, as bad as it sounds, takes the heat off the farms in Freeman's Reach and Pitt Town and whatnot. They're copping it a lot harder than anyone else. The only thing they've got going for them is because it's so open, it drains out probably real quick for you. But if the damage that's in Cornwallis wasn't there at the moment, farms like ours that's only had 3 floods on it since this weather event started in the last 4 years, probably would have had maybe another 2, and that's there's benefit for us, but someone's got to take the brunt of that.
And going back to what Paul was saying, how quick this last flood come down with the speed of the water. If Cornwallis was all repaired and that was how it was before we started flooding, how quick that water come down, and without that water being lost in that sort of section what we're talking about, that would have put a lot more pressure on your banks, because after that you get a lot of S-bends and turns in the river, naturally does. So that will then put a lot of pressure on the riverbanks downstream, because that water isn't getting lost in that big open area. But if what happened at Cornwallis, that can happen anywhere on the river. And once it breaks, then the water just keeps eating away at it.
If this water keeps coming down the way it is, and Cornwallis is fixed, I have no doubt it's going to happen from the breakaway, in between the breakaway and somewhere towards Windsor. It's just going to carve it open.
Well, that's what the breakaway is, isn't it?
That's what the breakaway is.
The breakaway was what's happened at Cornwallis.
Yeah, it is going to break it away. It is going to tear it open.
I'm finding now, after the floods, it takes a few harvests to get your paddocks evened out again, because you have patches that were not fit to harvest the first time, and then it's affecting the cuts down track. So it's ongoing struggles, because your paddocks aren't growing even.
They're not uniform.
They're not uniform.
Or you've left old bits.
Yeah, you left old bits.
We're going for that now, Cornwallis.
If it's thicker and older and thatchier, it seems like it obviously holds more silt. So and then you can get the paddock looking good, and you think it's all ready to go. Like you said, if there's a bit of an old bit there, you'll get to it, and then the next thing you know, it's exploding. You can't harvest it. So
we're going further at the moment. You cut in one roll, you get
Beautiful
5
roll.
beautiful rolls, then you get 1 or 2 rolls, and there's weak, no tensile strength, and that's just because it was an old crop from last year that you had to leave because you couldn't harvest it or wasn't quite ready or whatever the case was.
The flow-on effects.
And that's where sometimes biting the bullet and ploughing the paddock back in will get you that even crop quicker.
It's just hard sometimes
Hard
to
to
think like
say.
that,
That's right.
And I suppose with a younger paddock, you're more inclined to be rougher with it, be harsher on it, be it plough it in, start again, or be pretty hard and try and scrape or top make the silt or sand off it. But with a fit paddock, you're going, like, look what I've put into it.
Yeah.
I've got sails.
Try and get it up.
You're going to try and get it off the ground.
Yeah.
And then you end up with the troubles that these guys are talking about, which we've got the same troubles there as well.
Well, all of a sudden you got turf that was ready, you got orders for it, and you don't really have any light of where I'm going to cut from. So, it's hard to hold in. You've got 9 to 12 months before you're cutting that paddock again. So it's a very hard one to try and, I guess, work out what the best option is.
But you can have a 14 metre flood. If it comes up slow, and it's just water, if the if the way it's coming up isn't as fast as, you know, some of the other floods that we've had, it'll be clean water. It won't be too bad. Like some of the footage in there with the rocks and whatnot, that's another story again. But you won't get that. When it comes up slow, if you can fill up your lowlands and your lagoons and that, and meet the water where it jumps the road, there's less damage. But who knows what to do. You know, there's certain floodgates around the area, and who knows what the right thing is to do. Open those floodgates, keep those floodgates closed. It's you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some vision.
It's hard
there.
to know unless you know exactly how high it's going to go. It's hard to say what the best idea is.
There's a real vision there of that spill, and geez, it's a lot of force that comes down that river when those gates open. It's huge. Seeing it there, it's a marvel to see it every time. But geez, you guys must hate it.
What we're kind of grateful for is like the crop we grow is, you know, it prevents erosion to some degree. So we only could just imagine how bad it would look if we grew wheat or veggies or anything that needs more cultivation to get your crops up. Yeah, it'd be quite scary, and also with the water receding too, that's where a lot of damage can occur as well, especially on riverbanks and things.